Hello and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports. And today we're going to be talking about whether the Rugby Championship was a success or a failure for the Springboks. Now, obviously, on the face of it, we went in there hoping that we could win the tournament, which I always thought was going to be quite a big ask, given that we were going to be away for most of the tournament. We were supposed to play 2 games in New Zealand, 2 games in Australia, and then the 2 games at home. So it wasn't going to be a very big ask. And then we sort of moved to sort of neutral grounds and we were going to play those 2 games against New Zealand in Australia, which you'd think still sort of favors New Zealand, but maybe not to the same extent as obviously playing in New Zealand itself. So, but yeah, we're just going to look back at the Rugby Championship, look at some of the results, look at some of the teams we put out, look at some of the performances, and whether overall we are happy with where the Springboks are at after the Rugby Championship, or whether we are quite disappointed with what we saw on the field. Looking at sort of a range of factors, the squad rotation, the squad use, where our players are at, the coaching staff, whether they've learned, are we progressing as a team? Are we sort of building towards something? Are we forming a team that can potentially defend our World Cup title in France in 2 years' time? Those sort of questions are sort of the ones we need to try and answer. But before we do, please do smash like on the video and subscribe to the channel as well. Now, I'll take you back right to the beginning of the Rugby Championship, the 14th of August, just 1 week after clinching the British and Irish Lions series. South Africa hosted Argentina in the first game of the weekend. Well, in the first game of our Rugby Championship. Obviously, New Zealand took on Australia earlier that day. Now, so if we look at some of these results, New Zealand beat Australia on 14th of August, 57-22. So absolutely smashing Australia in the opening test of the Rugby Championship. That later that day, South Africa beat Argentina 32 points to 12, a bonus point victory to get our Rugby Championship underway. With what was a very much rotated side. Kobus Reynolds started, Alton Yankee started, we had Jesse Creel starting. We had France State at inside centre, we had Damon Willemse at full back. It was a very much a changed side that still managed to come away with a bonus point victory. I played Fussy got on the score sheet that day, and we sort of saw a very rotated side. And I think we were full of confidence because after having beaten the British and Irish Lions, to then be able to rotate so much within the side and go out and get a bonus point victory against Argentina, I think everybody would agree that we were very positive about our chance in the Rugby Championship and about the team. A week later, we played against Argentina once again, this time beating them 29 points to 10, not getting a bonus point despite all the main sort of stars coming back to the side. But still, 2 wins out of 2, and down over here looking pretty comfortable against Argentina. I think Argentina played a lot better and we didn't play particularly well. But to not play particularly well and get 19 points, or win by a 90-point margin, is still pretty impressive. And then that's a week later, New Zealand beat Australia 38 points to 21, a much closer game, just 17 points in it compared to their game earlier, which was 57-22. And we then departed to Australia. Now, we took a very big squad. I think eventually we took about a 45, 46-man squad, which was down to 43 by the end of it. After Nicholas Jansen van Rensburg and Thomas Latoy and a couple other players had to drop out due to personal issues and stuff like that. So on the 12th of September, New Zealand absolutely smashed Argentina, 39 points to 2-0. And later that day, South Africa went down to Australia, 26 points to 28. And that was sort of where the issues became, this sort of the shock defeat against Australia that no one was really expecting. I think we were so sort of focused in on going to beat New Zealand and whether we could beat New Zealand and win the Rugby Championship that a lot of the South African public didn't take Australia particularly seriously. Now, people that have been watching Australia quite a lot, you could see they've had some very interesting performances here, sometimes where they've played pretty well and they'll get reward. But across those 3 sort of beat us to cup games against New Zealand, we saw an Australian side which knew how to attack, but they defensively weren't particularly good. But we did see a lot of improvement from them coming, from even between the 57-22 to the 38-21 points. They were scoring points against New Zealand. So that loss was a very frustrating loss against South Africa. I think I look back at the Rugby Championship, I think that's probably my biggest gripe, was losing that match simply because Andre Pollard left a lot of points out there. I think if we're being very honest, that is the sole sort of reason we lost that game. Craig Cooper kicked a penalty right towards the end at 100% to sort of win by 2 points, and had Pollard even operated at I think it was an 85 or 80% kicking percentage, we would have won that game. If he'd gotten one more kick than he had missed, I think he missed about 3 or 4, we win that game. And I think we win that game, suddenly we're into the Rugby Championship and we're in with a chance. A week later, for the first time this year, the Springboks were outplayed, where Australia won 30 points to 17. And that was the worst performance, Jacques Nienaber called it the worst performance since 2018 from the Springboks when we lost in Argentina. And that was, I think if we're going to be very honest, that's the only game this year where the Springboks have been completely outplayed, where they have not been in the content, they haven't really looked like winning, and they were very, very poor, losing by 13 points against Australia. And with that, the Rugby Championship pretty much disappeared. Later that day, Argentina losing to New Zealand 13 points to 36. Now, it was in the big sort of New Zealand test, and everybody sort of predicting, a lot of fans were predicting record losses, and if we couldn't beat Australia, it was going to be a disaster against New Zealand. 19 points to 17, losing right at the death to a penalty by Jordie Barrett in extra time. And you look at that game, and I still maintain that I think South Africa was the better side on the day. A lot of New Zealand fans will disagree, but I do think that South Africa had done enough to win that game. And if it wasn't for a couple of pretty ill discipline, that they should have gone on to win that game. I think it was just some very basic errors which cost them. But it was a very much a game of pride in the line, saying, you know what, it doesn't matter if we lose to Australia, we can respond a week later and go toe to toe against New Zealand, who at that time had just reclaimed the #1 ranking. Australia then demolished Argentina 27 points to 8. So we knew that we were going to pretty much finish third in the Rugby Championship. It all then came down to the last week, where Argentina lost to Australia 32 points to 17. Argentina finally putting in quite a spirited performance despite a couple of players losing out, and then sort of coming back to score 70 points toward in the second half. And then South Africa beat New Zealand. Now, I think that was a huge moment for the Springboks, because I think if you lose that game, and you look at the entire tournament, you think, well, we lost 4 matches, we only won 2. We finished very much. We probably would have finished about 10 points or 11 points in the Rugby Championship log, which would have been 7 points behind New Zealand. It could have been almost 10 points plus behind. But it was 7 points behind Australia and 10 points plus behind New Zealand. But I think winning that game was a very big moment for the Springboks. And I think if we look at the Rugby Championship as a whole, whilst it's very disappointing that, I think, as I said, I looked at that first test against Australia, and I think that's a result that should have gone the other way. But as a whole, I think there are a lot of reasons to be very positive as Springbok fans. I think having this year, we first of all, we retained the #1 ranking. We took it back, so we're still the #1 ranked side in the world as a result of beating New Zealand. You can't really argue that. People say, oh, you haven't played rugby and stuff like that. We've now played 8 and 9 tests this year. Last 3, we've got that ranking back. Last 4, I think. We've got that ranking back, which is the main thing. Going into the end of the tour, we've got the #1 ranking back. I think what we saw in that Saturday, 2nd of October, that 31-29 victory, was a colossal test match which I think pretty much solidified these two teams as the best 2 teams in the world. We saw a much better South African game plan, was much more positive. We kept ball in hand. We scored a couple of tries. We looked very, very good. And I think equally we looked very capable of disrupting New Zealand. And I think the important thing is you look at some of the performances across the year. We've got a couple of very big superstars in South Africa which started standing up in that game. The likes of Lekanya, Damon Dale, and Siya Kolisi. I think Kwaka Smith has sort of proven a lot of doubters wrong. Even Etzebeth Ludiar continued to be huge for the Boks. The front row continues to be a very important part and a very sort of comfortable asset for the Springboks. And I think the biggest sort of frustration comes down to the fact that, and I suppose maybe it's a good thing, as we move into the end of the year tour with 2 big players under the microscope, those being Andre Pollard and not Faf Clerk, Billy Leroux, with Francis then coming off the bench in that second test against New Zealand and sort of changing the game, and Alton Yankees putting in a brilliant cameo as well. So going into the end of your tour, we're going to discuss that live on Wednesday night tonight. We're going to be talking about more sort of where to from the Springboks. But if we look at the entire Rugby Championship as a whole, so we finished in 15 points, 3 points behind Australia. And I think that's why I'm so frustrated at that first Australian game, because we kick our points and we beat Australia. We come second in the Rugby Championship, and we trail New Zealand by 7 points, maybe, or 6 points. And I think if you had said to me at the beginning of the year, right, you're going to beat the British and Irish Lions, you're going to come second in the Rugby Championship, you're going to lose to Australia once, New Zealand once, but you'll beat both of them, I would have been very happy. To be fair, I think if you had told me, would you prefer to lose to Australia twice and beat New Zealand once, or beat Australia twice and you lose to New Zealand twice, I actually would probably rather beat New Zealand. I think in terms of pride, in terms of the #1 ranking, in terms of being able to sort of prove that we are still one of the best, you've got to be beating New Zealand. They're a side that not a lot of people beat. And it's become very clear that we are the one side that can go toe-to-toe with New Zealand. 19-17 the week before, 31-29, two games with 2 points in it going either way. It's the 2 best sides in the world. And I think that the last game, you can't really sort of argue with, the Boks game plan is boring and stuff like that. The Boks did everything right to disrupt New Zealand game plan and get a victory. Now, New Zealand are still sort of I think they always sort of be the barometer really when it comes to sort of rugby and play very attractive rugby and stuff like that. Finish with a points difference of 114, getting 25 points, 5 victories. They were the best side in the rugby championship. I think we can be very honest about that. But I think given the year that South Africa has had, having been in a bye bubble pretty much since before July, sort of from June through to October, as a Springbok fan, I'm very happy with this team is. I think if we look at it, I think I would like to probably see maybe a little bit more rotation throughout the Rugby Championship, especially after the Argentina game where we did rotate a lot and we got the result. But genuinely, as a Springbok fan, I'm very happy with where the team is now. A lot sort of comes down to sort of the end of the year. And I think that that victory against New Zealand put a lot of people down sort of at ease, where we don't need to question the coaching staff as much. At the end of the day, they have delivered a test victory against New Zealand. They have delivered a series victory against the Lions, and that's just this year. And now we're going to the end of the year tour. We get to play Wales, Scotland, and England. 3 very good sides. But obviously, it's a rugby championship that we would have liked to have done better. And I said, I think it would have been if we had beaten Australia in that first test and we had finished second. I think I would have said that. I would have actually said the rugby championship was a success because we had maintained a number 1 ranking. We had beaten New Zealand, and we had sort of gone over and competed quite well. But I want to know what you guys think. Do you think it was a success down the comments below? Do you think it was a failure? Or we sort of on the fence, stuff like that? I don't think there's much reason to be too negative. I think that we've learned a lot during this tour. I think we learned a lot from that Australia loss, which we then responded very well against New Zealand. I think that the coaching staff are sort of learning quite quickly in terms of substitutions, and we did a lot of learning over the year. So I think the Springboks are in quite a healthy situation going into the end of the year tour. But I want to know what you think down in the comments below. Please do smash like the video as well. My name is Steven. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll chat to you soon.